Welcome to this week's episode of Autonomy, where I throw out our mains by talking too loudly into the mic after it was way too quiet. I, of course, am your most dashingly good-looking host, Stefan and Ilia, CEO and co-founder here at Polymath Robotics. Sitting across from me is a man who happens to believe in the evolution of Lego figures. I believe in the intelligent design of Lego figures by someone in Denmark, but this gentleman has a single flat piece of Lego evolving over multiple steps into a Lego minifig. Sir, how did you come to this radical conception of self-organizing plastic?
You know, this is my favorite shirt. It's so my favorite shirt that I got it, I don't know where, and it had started to fall apart. And my incredible wife tracked down where it's from.
Really?
And got me a new one.
That's a great present.
Right.
That's a great present. My incredible wife might have just disappeared it as soon as the holes showed up and I kept on wearing it.
That happened too, but a new one appeared.
For what it's worth, Ilia is wearing a shirt that has 5 steps of a Lego minifig kind of like evolving out of individual pieces of a Lego character. This, of course, is our show, Automate It, our weekly podcast that we haven't done in 8 weeks, where we talk about robots, how to build them, how much they hurt our hearts, and how fun they can be.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Not much has happened, huh?
Nah, nothing in robotics. We're just chilling all the time. We do this podcast in 2 segments. The first of which, we invent a robot out of random cards that we draw. And the second of which, we're going to talk about a topic in robotics. And I think right now we're going to talk about what seems to be going on in robotics. And Ilia, what is that?
Chaos and misery.
At big companies and small companies, and for some reason we seem to be doing okay, which is kind of a fun,
weird.
Very weird. I was talking to one of our investors the other day, and I said we keep on accusing each other of financial crimes every time the numbers seem to look okay. All right, so for our game, we each draw a card at random. Ilia is going to draw a business card. I'll draw a technology card, and this will kind of simulate what it's like to start a robotics company, where one person really wants to solve a particular business problem, another person has a particular technology that they want. Ilia, what business card are you drawing?
So I got summer refreshment.
It's a very real card, and the card I have looks like insect robots. It's so funny. It might
specifically insects or just legged in general.
Legged robots, but I've been thinking a lot about insect robots. I just reread Fahrenheit 451, which prominently features a robot they call the mechanical hound, which is an 8-legged hound, as many hounds are, that hunts people down for reading books and injects them with a needle to kill them, because that's what hounds and spiders do.
It's 2 hounds sewn together.
Yeah, and the fastest way to run across land is, of course, an 8-legged robot. But, if we want cool refreshment, you know what I've heard recently is a very nice way to cool off in the summer? Is if you have like a freezer that you keep an extra shirt in.
So I was just going to suggest, live in a cooler climate, but I guess this works too.
Yeah, I mean, for those of us who don't want to move to Trondheim, or Trondheim, however you pronounce that place.
It's a combination of Toronto and Jotunheim, apparently.
I'm sure the Vikings named it after Toronto.
Yeah.
If you don't want to live in Trondheim and you want to cool off during the summer, a great way to do that is keep a spare shirt in a mini fridge, pull it out, put it on. Ideally, you do this in a public setting. So the mini fridge is maybe at a local restaurant. You guys take your shirt off in the restaurant, put it back, put the new one on, and then you're nice, cool, and refreshed.
Excellent. So what does this have to do with robots?
So I think that's a service that should be enabled.
Okay.
Because I tried doing this for a time, and in my home office I had 15 of these mini fridges. Okay. And because the heat from the mini fridges warmed up my room so much that I had to constantly go through all the shirts.
I honestly, even having known you for 2 and a bit years, I don't know if you're being honest about that. That does sound like something you might do, considering your tech hoarding that you do. All your stuff.
We also just did an office cleanup because we're having some visitors next week, during which I tried to save every computer for projects that I nor anyone will never do.
Yeah, exactly. At best, they'll be space heaters.
So if you want these cool shirts delivered, obviously the best way to do it is have some sort of walking robot.
So I'm trying to understand. So is this for sports stadiums? Those t-shirt cannons, except they're cooled t-shirt cannons Except they're not t-shirt cannons because a cold shirt fired at you at speed will probably bruise you.
Instead, I want a 1,000-pound robot to jump off the field, scurry through the crowd, ideally like hurting people along the way, to bring me a t-shirt that
Deliver
is
your t-shirt.
like a little bit colder than the ambient temperature.
Does it have to, like, if we're going to go spider robot, we might as well go all in, and the spider, like, shoots a web at you in the shape of a shirt that's also cold.
Well, Spider-Man says everyone only gets one of those like web hammocks. I don't know if you remember that from the comics, but that is a Spider-Man rule, and I want more than one cold shirt. Okay. So the spider has to bring me a cold shirt.
Okay. So no forming it in place.
It's well, I guess like what's the state of spider like robots as we get told we're going way over time?
Not great currently.
Really? Why? I mean, there's like dog robots.
Yeah, so
more legs should make the problem easier.
The bigger thing,
at least from a stability perspective.
Right. So the bigger thing about legged kinematics is that the more you add in, the more you can be statically stable, which means that like any position your legs are in, you're mostly stable because you always have 3 points of contact or more.
Yeah.
Right. The trade-off is that reduces your speed drastically.
Yeah.
So that's
in
why
other words, if you're hunting
spot,
down people for reading books, an 8-legged spider robot is probably
is actually bad.
Huh.
So
almost like Ray Bradbury was a crappy roboticist.
Surprise, surprise, the sweet spot is 4 legs, which is why most of the fast animals around us on land are 4-legged instead of 8-legged.
Well, what about the controls problem of like mapping out where these legs are going? Like
that's not too much more complicated than 4 legs. It really makes your stability problem actually a lot easier because you can just be statically stable through your walk or run cycle.
Yep.
But you end up having to slow everything down just because you're going to have a lot more self-collisions.
Yeah.
Or the chance of self-collisions because your legs are just going to get in each other way.
A supercomputer.
It's not a computation problem. It's a physics and space occupying problem. Like if you have more legs to fill the same space, you just have to wait for the first leg to get out of the way so you can stick the next leg in that space and propel you forward. Like there's a limited amount of space these legs can reach.
So you're saying, despite how incredibly great of an idea frozen t-shirts delivered on demand is, and how that's an idea that will be worth billions of dollars imminently, spider robots might not be the most that's the weak point of the idea.
I just want to credit our controls engineer Alex coming up this idea just for posterity, so that when he sues us for his $1 billion idea being leaked in public by Stefan, I want to disclaim any knowledge of this or any participation.
We're a very serious company who never talks about anything stupid at work.
Yeah.
So with that being said, stupid things going on at work. We had a pretty crazy month. We had a trade show. We had some business trips. I foolishly took some PTO, which should never happen again, obviously. And one of the big parts is we were at CES for a week. Ilia, last year, we saw some amazing booths at CES. Lots of autonomy here, autonomy there. The best company in the world, TOG, had a massive booth with absolutely nothing to do with what they may or may not do. What did you notice or not notice at CES?
So I like the summary that somebody said to me that gave me permission to steal, which is, this year, nobody has said the word level 4 autonomy.
Yeah.
That's just not in anybody's vocabulary. It's on no posters. It's in no presentations. It suddenly has fallen off the face of the earth.
That's so weird because last year, the year before, everyone was claiming that they were going to have level 4 autonomy instantly.
No,
but no one would make a claim like that if it wasn't real.
Everybody has removed the hard terms like level 4 because you can define that term. and now the best I've seen is like autonomous, vaguely, self-driving vaguely. Really what we saw at the show was a lot of AI thrown everywhere.
Yeah.
And it'd be like AI car, AI autonomous car, AI self-driving car, but no actual definition of what that meant.
Yeah.
Or timeline or technology involved or anything.
Well, I think what's funny is I feel like over the last 2 years, the word autonomy has stopped meaning anything as well. I remember maybe a year ago, I was talking with a major ag OEM who said, what you guys are doing isn't autonomy. When I think of autonomy, I think of an app that you go into and you click a button and a specific behavior happens that Farmer John cares about. And that is autonomy when that is happening, which,
Their own private definition of autonomy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But that's not really, I think, what the public has been trained to expect now.
Yep.
With especially, the worst offender of this is Tesla's Full self-driving for real this time. Promise version 12 revision 8.
You got to, if you pay us another $5,000, baby. Yeah. I promise this I'll give you that sweet serious. Autonomy.
Yeah, exactly.
I won't hurt you again. I've always loved you.
Don't look at the fine print on page 360 that says only ever use this on highways. Don't look at that. Just, trust us for real, bro. So they are basically one of the last groups standing making any real effort towards this,
or at least claiming.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Waymo is just as taciturn in what they promise publicly versus not as they have been. Obviously, Cruise is it's been announced that Cruise is getting its funding cut significantly. One of Motional's two big backers has backed out, so another big autonomy team taking a hit. A number of the off-highway OEMs that had autonomy programs have, I think, publicly done riffs of those organizations. There's some large teams in that space that have not publicly done some stuff. It seems like we're in a spot where the big companies who raised money at 2021 valuations are now trying to figure out what existence looks like when money is no longer free.
Yeah. And just a minor kind of explanation or expansion here is that the Waymo vehicle is a truly autonomous vehicle in the limited sense of within their deployment zone, under a certain speed, with all these restrictions.
I mean, I also believe there's more humans looking at stuff remotely. Every team that you might have said that about has turned out later to have lots of people looking at things.
Lots of people. So
no one like, teleop is everyone's, secret significant other.
Maybe. So I might have told the story before, maybe not. When I took a Waymo to work one time, it got stuck waiting behind other cars and nudged itself into a bike lane and got very confused and just kept going back and forth and trying to nudge itself out of there. And I called the help button, and they had to dispatch a road team that would come to me and teleop it in person out of this confusing situation for the vehicle. And that whole stack just wouldn't make sense if they were actually doing any behind the scenes like Wizard of Ozing.
Yeah.
That really felt like a confused machine behavior.
Yeah, could be.
Anyway, neither here nor there. Like they're probably the most serious remaining effort, but they have dumped. Who knows the real number?
Well, there's a couple of companies that now claim to be doing LLMs for self-driving.
Right.
Which,
that'll work great.
Yeah. How could it not?
Yeah.
So given that so many people have started to use the word autonomy to mean so many different definitions, a strategy that we started doing in Q4 of last year is like taking our autonomy stack and no longer calling it autonomy. Basically, there's lots of companies who decided that the app for Farmer John was autonomy and that's their core competency. But, I guess I'll buy SLAM from someone. I guess I'll buy obstacle detection from somebody. So a big part of what we did over the last 4 or 5 months is say, when we're talking to customers, no longer say that we do autonomy, but we build all these components of which you can turn into something that drives from one point to another. And it turns out that's been rather successful, which is part of why we've been so busy not doing podcasts.
Yeah. The last few weeks post CS have very much been a whirlwind of new customers and new designs and on-site visits, which has all been very good, but very, very, very busy. But I think so. I think the thing that we did poorly early on is we didn't define this amorphous blob known as autonomy because nobody else was either, realistically. And I think now that we've concretely said this is exactly the things we can and can't do, and here's the things we're working on, that's gained a lot more confidence, and that's made the sale process a lot more straightforward.
And so actually, like, talking about that a little bit, when we just divide ourselves into modules, a fun thing that the way that we think about what deserves to be a module and what isn't is basically what parts of autonomy do we do that are individually harder than credit card processing. And for those of you who have never built a website before Stripe, way back when, you had to petition a bank to give you a merchant account. You had to build a bunch of code to interact with their janky code, so you could safely take credit card numbers and make sure that bank was the right number and do chargebacks. And a major friction point of setting up an e-commerce site was taking credit cards. Now you can just get that as an API. And pre-Stripe, this is a moderately hard problem. And it turns out that nearly every problem in robotics is harder than Stripe. So we've gone from like, oh, we sell autonomy as a core thing to 45 odd modules that are everything from using your lidars for you, through creating cost maps, through different kinematic models, through driving tandem trailers, to doing following another vehicle with a hot modifiable offset. And that's been successful for us from a go-to-market perspective, but I think it's also been successful for us when we talk to customers about just how hard autonomy is. When we have a list of 45 things, each of which are harder than a I don't know, $40 billion company.
And you know, just to jump in, my Canadian engineeringness, I have to put in this disclaimer, like, obviously we know Stripe does more than just process the credit card.
Nothing more important than that, though.
There's a big chunk of their effort to fraud detection and risk management and fund availability, and like, yes, that is a big complicated problem.
And there's much more to using a LiDAR than running the driver.
Stefan is just talking about like literally taking the credit card number in a web page and sending it to a bank. That's just the PC stuff.
But in reality, every part of a robot is harder than the $50 billion, I just checked the market cap, effort that is called Stripe. And part of why the robotic space has struggled so much is, like, to build a demo, you've had to build 52 stripes.
Yeah,
across
and
8 disciplines.
And nobody cares.
Yeah,
and nobody appreciates us.
Nobody cares that you can drive.
Not like boohoo, nobody appreciates us, but like, if you're not a roboticist, you don't understand how difficult even the most basic thing for
most VCs who invest in AI and robotics, who I've met with and explain what we do, have responded, yeah, but don't you get all of that from Ross?
Yeah, that's a great response, by the way. I love that response in a lot of ways.
Why?
Because at least then they know something.
They heard
of the
word
robotics
Ross once.
Yeah, like they know something of the robotics market. They know something exists.
It's like when I go to a Chinese restaurant and say, sure. If you know nothing about Chinese, you think, wow, Stefan's fluent in Chinese. Yeah. If you speak Chinese, you're like, man, that guy's tones are terrible.
No, but I mean, I like it because it gives us a really good comparison to say that the Ross, you could consider it is a toolbox, but really, if you look at the way the web has evolved, a lot of the web has moved to open source.
Yep.
For example, the Apache backend for web hosting, right? And saying, well, isn't that just Ross? Is like saying, well, isn't Squarespace just Apache? Like, yeah, sure, right? Like under the hood, somebody could take Apache and build a web page.
Is that how you actually pronounce it? You sure it's not Apache?
Apache. Apache, sure.
I'm pretty sure it's named after the Native American tribe who is incredibly warlike.
Sure.
And cool, and the helicopters that are awesome.
I think it was named after the fact that they had to patch it constantly, and so it was a joke that it's Apache web server. But that comparison is pretty apt in that the web didn't really take off from the early nerdy days.
Yeah.
Until you started.
Like,
to
I remember
companies.
in the 90s, like my friend wanting to go on the internet, and me be like, yeah, but what is there here? There's nothing. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. Like, what are you going to do on the internet?
Until you had the Squarespaces and the Stripes and the whoever who made very relatively complex technology a kind of click and go interface. And that's really what we want to do for robotics, is that you click somewhere on the map, the robot just goes there, and you don't care about all the giant amount of code under it that makes that actually
work.
Instead
you start thinking about like where should it go and why, who wants it to go there, and what's the design language of them telling it to go there.
Yeah, how do I attract customers to my webpage with a pretty design and A/B testing and all this stuff for my web storefront?
Or frankly, what's a website that anyone wants to go to?
Exactly. Yeah, all the like actual stuff that you actually use to sell to real customers.
Weird.
Rather than like, oh, my web page loads 0.01% faster because I spent 6 months optimizing this one function in Apache.
And my contact distribution network is on point.
Yeah, exactly. So we see ourselves that way in a lot of in a lot of ways, in that we really need to take this next step to turn robotics into something that's much more deployable by way less nerdy people.
But I think what's neat about the fact that autonomy is no longer in vogue at things like CES is it means the business buffoons like yours truly are no longer promising that every tractor sold by XYZ OEM is going to be fully autonomous by 20XX or 2030X and more. And now there's a whole bunch of people within these organizations who recognize that this is hard and that the things that need to be core are not point-to-point navigation, are not even localization, aren't perception, but like function and integration. And when an industry starts focusing on function and integration, then industry starts being valuable.
Yeah.
And with that being said, Ilia, what are we going to talk about next week?
Slim chance we have a podcast next week, honestly. Judging both by our historical record and what our next week looks like.
We have visitors and trips for the next 3 weeks straight. None of them for shorter than 2 or 3 days.
So we'll apologize in advance, but I will entirely blame Stefan, just so you know.
And that sounds fair. That being said, thanks so much for joining us this week.
See you next time.